In the previous section, we defined FPGA IO terminology. By the end of this module, you will be able to add FPGA IO to a LabVIEW project and access FPGA IO in an FPGA VI. Okay, so let's talk about configuring FPGA IO. So the way that you would add FPGA IO to your LabVIEW project could differ depending on what kind of target you're using. So if you're using Compact Rio, what you can do is you can detect the modules when you add your chassis, and this is an easy method because all the FPGA IO will be added automatically. If you're using R-Series, what you can do is you can manually add FPGA IO. When you're using R-Series, there's going to be a lot of lines typically. So by manually adding the FPGA IO, you can select which exact FPGA IO channels you're going to be using in your project. So when you're adding a Compact Rio to your LabVIEW project, and it's already on the network, what you can do is when you're adding it, it'll ask you, do you want to discover CSeries modules? If you click discover, then what will happen is it'll go to the LabVIEW project will go to the Compact Rio, find out what modules on there, and it will automatically add the FPGA IO for those modules to your project. In this slide, we see how to add FPGA IO to a R-Series project. So if we look over there on the left, we've got a project with the R-Series FPGA target. And to add I/O, you would just right-click that FPGA target, go to New, and select FPGA I/O. And that'll launch the window that you see on your right. So you can go through the different connectors and add specific lines that you're going to be using. And that's the way that you would add specific FPGA I/O to a R-Series project. And we'll see this later in a demo. So in this slide, we see the FPGA I/O palette. And this is where you would get functions and nodes that relate to I/O. So for example, you can place down an I/O node, and that's the way that you would access the values of I/O. There's I/O constants, methods, and properties, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. So here we see two methods of getting that I/O node on your block diagram. One way is you can place down an I/O node from the functions palette, and then you can right-click it, go to select FPGA I/O, go to Module 1, and then select the particular Module 1 TC0 I/O from your project. The other way you can do it is you can go straight to your Project Explorer and then find your I/O. So in this case, we found and browse to Mod 1 TC0. And what you can do is you can simply click and drag that onto your block diagram, and it'll be placed down there for you. So this is probably the easiest method to do it. Now let's go and take a look at this in a demo. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to demo is adding I/O to an R-Series board. So we can see in our project that we have a R-Series board right here, a 7852R. And what we're going to do is add some I/O to it. So right now, we don't have any I/O listed in our project, but we can right-click and go to New, and we can go to FPGA I/O to add our I/O. So I'm going to select this. It's going to pop up this window, and I can kind of navigate through the I/O that's available on my R-Series board. So I'm going to say, let's say in this project I happen to be using AI0, and I also need to use digital I/O 0 as well. So now I've added these. I'm going to click OK. I notice that on my project, I've added AI0 and DIO0 on connector 0. Okay. So one thing that might be useful is AI0 is not super descriptive, so maybe I want to give it a more descriptive name. So I can right-click here, or press F2 to rename. And instead of calling it AI0, I'm going to call this accelerometer 0. And then here, for digital I/O 0, I'm going to call this emergency stop. Okay. So now I've got a descriptive name for my I/O, and I'm going to go to a VI, go to the block diagram, and I'm going to add my I/O. So I'm going to show you two ways of doing it. One way, which is probably the easiest way, is you can just drag it straight from your project into your block diagram. And now I've got my I/O here. The other way of doing it is you can right-click, go to FPGA I/O, put down an I/O node, and notice that it doesn't know which specific I/O it's associated with, and you can left-click it, and then browse to whichever one you want to use. So in this case, I'm going to choose emergency stop, and now I've got an I/O node where I can access the value of emergency stop. Okay. So let me just close this. And now I'm going to bring up a compact RIO project. So now here I've got my compact RIO project, and what I've done is I've added the compact RIO, and I've automatically discovered its different modules. So notice that I've got module 1 here with this I/O. I've got module 2 with some more I/O, and I also got module 3 with some more I/O. In this case, this one's analog output 0. So let me go ahead and open this up. So let's say analog output 0, and I can rename that, maybe call this motor or something like that. So now I can just drag this from here, from my project, into my block diagram, and I can start using it. Okay, and that's pretty much it for adding I/O for compact RIO projects and also our series projects. Now you can add FPGA IO to a LabVIEW project and access FPGA IO in an FPGA VI. Next, we will describe different FPGA IO data types.